Good day, everybody. Hello. I'm going to make a video today on the relativeness of civil social activism. What the relativeness of social civil activism has to do with is basically the categorization of when something is radically progressive. When do you say something is vanguard, cutting edge, revolutionary, radical, etc.? It really is relative. You can't say, well, we have gotten to the ultimate furthest point of something. It is only radical and progressive or revolutionary in relationship to what is the general consensus, the general belief of a society at the time. So, why is this important? Because when there are when there's social activism that attempts to correct or direct society and away from error and try to bring enlightenment to situations that are either conflicted or going about things the wrong way. It's summer, so I don't want to close the window. This is screwed up. They're restoring a building across the street. Anyways, I'll continue. Anyways, I've been listening to Matt Walsh a lot lately. He is a great orator, and why I say this is because you can listen to him effortlessly. He's a minimalist. He doesn't load his dissertations with humor or exaggerated ironies to try to entertain you. He really just boom, 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 chugs forward. And I guess my measure is that I can leave him on while I'm doing other stuff. Because I don't like to leave things in the background and then forget about it. It becomes just a nuisance. And with him, actually, I can write things and I'm listening and laughing at the very subtle ironies that he points out and stuff. And you know, I was just listening to what I have been listening to are subjects about transgender, gender ideology, this sort of thing, and all the absurdities, the so easy to see error, mistakes that we're making. It's just enthralling to listen to somebody be able to articulate it well. I've been making videos, but I'm not good at speaking. I meander and I lack reading and vocabulary, so I don't know really how to be smooth and entertaining in that capacity. But what I do is I try now to make videos where I just try to be brief and get a good point across that maybe is worth learning or observing and nothing else until I become better at video editing and making this kind of work, doing this kind of work. So as I was listening to him, you know, one thing that comes out in the wash for me is what a lot of us have been noticing is that the woke, progressive, gay agenda and this whole area is characterized by sort of lashing out with vile scorn, mean, aggressive, you know, doing things like planning on, he was talking about how they were planning on bringing down his channel and faking, saturating servers and all sorts of devious little plots and immediately, in my own personal experience, discussing and arguing on social media groups, going to violent insults and reactiveness immediately when you're focused on trying to explain the sensibleness and the logic of something. I don't know why the light is going down here. The sensible logic of and reasoning of a point that you're making. As soon as you come threaten, and that's why it's so entertaining to listen to guys like Matt because they go through the same stuff and they point out. So you realize, yeah, I see that too. Every time you try to um, talk about things, it's like they're trying to hide. As soon as you bring the light close to that place they're trying to be vague about, uh, it's like they sent a guard dog ahead of them to bark at you and just get angry and throw an insult and keep you away from forcing them to accept the logic that they will know makes sense. And so before they get to that embarrassing situation, ultimately for them, they get they pre-attack with violence, basically verbal and emotional violence. Um, and so, why is this so characteristic? Why is this always? It seems to be the frontier, and this is why I defined what is progressive, what is radical, what is vanguard. Um, Today, this is what maybe 20 years ago, or no, actually much more than that. 40 years ago, 50 years ago, it was truly progressive to say don't beat up guys that look for love in the same gender. Don't ostracize them. Don't make them segregate them, make them feel like there's something wrong with them, and there's something here we need to understand. And at the same time, the areas of psychology were growing and saying, hey, no, wait, this happens during development. Children, it's not. Don't take it out on them because they probably had this kind of family environment and treated a certain way by their parents. And this whole science was just growing also. And so it was at that point, when it wasn't even called gender ideology, something progressive, radical, and truly an avant-garde movement in human sciences. Then it just kind of folded over itself for having, I don't want to get into explain this because I'm going to go into tangents, but basically for for wanting to establish something that is not thoroughly explained. And this is how I'm trying to connect it actually to this last frontier area that we conclude or we leave the discussion at, which is the absurdity, the anger, the violence, and they're just wrong. And we know that we're seeing things correctly, we're analyzing this properly, and we just leave it at that, and at them just being left in this idling anger and situation of fighting something that you know. And I believe that at this point, revealing and correcting the mislogic of them is vanguard, progressive, radical. And there would be a further, like I said, radical, progressive, vanguard is always relative to something that has been through the general mass conception by most of society of a topic. The only thing that gives you validity is saying, well, I can bounce this off a great number of people in society. Otherwise you don't have an audience, you don't have a purpose, you don't have enough people's lives that it would make sense for you to work so hard if not for making a difference to so many people. And so the relativeness is juxtaposed to the consensus of the general belief in culture about something. And so there's a distance in what you're now explaining, either solving or correcting, and that distance defines that you're being radical, avant-garde, progressive, revolutionary, what have you. So at this point in the evolution of Western society, I would say people like Matt and many others that don't come to mind right now are the leading edge, are the ones that are saying, no, stop, we're going totally off the deep end here. And because it's the furthest and the most extended intelligence that is retroactively analyzing what we're doing and where we're going. and what is happening, and how we're most importantly hurting the lives, entire lives, because children, once they do this stuff, they can't. They're left like that guy in his documentary. What is a woman? It breaks your heart. And immediately, if you know a little bit about the subject, you know that there's hundreds of people like that that can lift their arm. Hundreds, thousands, I don't know. Honestly, I haven't researched that number, but either hundreds or thousands of people that can lift their arms and see that missing piece of flesh. So I kind of feel that I want to answer that for Matt Walsh and so many other ones of us. I get very nervous when I record, and my English goes back, regresses a great deal. It probably has to do for for having read very little and just basically being a listener, a video generation, watcher of media. Um, and that would be to explain where this anger and where the elation, sort of the release, the elation that they feel is related actually to the anger. The elation I'm talking about, the sort of the constant pride, when there's, there could not, the society could not be more conducive to letting gays do whatever they want. And yet pride, we've got to continue. So there's this sort of, also in the community itself, sort of the kind of the style of humor. It's always this louder, sort of meanish or sarcastic thing against women, against straights, and it's like they're always complaining joyfully, always joyfully saying, I got away from that. Look at me now. I'm wonderful. And this, coupled with the anger, which is a direct reaction to anybody trying to quash it, or their perception of that, anybody trying to silence it, is the unresolved last sort of frontier that we've left. People who are doing the most vanguard work, which is correcting this mass mistaken direction that we're going in, have left it at, well, look at, we are saying the truth, and look at these people, and how they continue to be, and they don't see themselves, they don't see what they're actually saying, and they just stay angry and insolent and, burlesque, vulgar, and, and that's it. We just leave them there. And then we're happy to know that, well, at least I'm, way out here seeing what we've actually done to ourselves. But of course, that is just a relative point, a relative place that was able to be made thanks to the mass amount of people that are able to understand the absurdity. Just the large number of people that are able to see how much we've messed up is so large, is such a big number, that we're able to create the new vanguard, the new, because I've been listening to women. I mean, this has been going on. The Italians had a song, I remember, I don't know, like 30 years ago, where a pop song of a guy that says, Luca used to be gay, but he's not anymore. He sees what he really wants, and a girl completes him, a girl makes him feel better. I think we had something too in the 80s or like 90s. The guy from Ghostbusters he made a song saying, I like girls or something. Forget what it was. I like girls. Anyways, so it's not like new, but the amount of people necessary to be able to firmly base down or lay down an advancing progress that would grow, that would continue to evolve and become more listened to, and finally politicians will say, well, maybe we did make a mistake. For it to get there, it's maybe now finally happening, hopefully, this film will be part of that finally arrived at impact that was necessary for the true combative debate to flare up and perhaps change directions, correct past mistakes. So this is how long it can take for uh, people starting to see we're going the wrong way, where it's not exactly like that, until there's finally a movement that has the force to counteract. Because we already know that the opposite side, the one that hysterically wants to loudly and insolently and joyfully, gleefully establish what they believe to be progressive and new and woke and all that. We know that their base is so large that they weren't in a situation where they were not advancing. But the correcting movement, which is the true vanguard, the true revolution, is not its mass is not critically large enough to truly start pushing back or pushing that in the right direction, and having politicians speak up and legislatures change the law, pass new laws. Um, and so what I was thinking earlier in the kitchen was something that is pertinent to this. And it was that I wanted to write on Facebook. I wanted to write, one day in the future, someday humanity will have arrived, will have arrived at such a level of intelligence about its own society that it will be able to say and look back at these times and say every single problem or sort of deviation and craziness that occurred in sexuality, with installing social homosexuality as a civil category of people that are born that way, or transgender operations being considered an equal gender as men and women are, and all of the craziness that even abortion and all the stuff around sexuality uh, will be understood as having been caused by culture and society, making the people who suffered it, the women who believed that they had to have an abortion, I don't want to get into that right now. Not an absolutist when it comes to abortion, but generally speaking, the people that believe that they were liberated and that nature just wanted them to be optimally fulfilled by being gay their whole life, and transsexual was just a mistake. Transsexuality was detecting a mistake that nature made, and they are correcting through surgery. And all these things, really, they were the victims of things that were caused by the ways and the forms our society uh, uh, was structured, taught itself, believe the things that we believe, the way we organize day-to-day living, the values that ruled our families and our institutions, basically all of society and all of what society had come to teach itself about existence and the world and culture and so forth, and the way parents and friends and immediate environment influenced individuals, is what caused these people to be the victims. In other words, it's something that we don't grasp yet. We don't see it that way. We focus on things that individuals do. But what I believe is that someday in the future we'll realize that as a collective intelligence, as a society, as a culture, we were causing this to happen to our individuals, which essentially is completely different. Spirit and scientific logic about, as far as human sciences go, in understanding it. And as such, what I was talking about earlier, that this last place that we left it at, the true radicals that we are, and seeing how bad we've been going about this in society, Hollywood and lawmakers have been doing to children indirectly through our beliefs and culture and so forth, are just going to stay angry and continue to fester, can be pushed, can be answered by understanding that what I just said, I just explained. I didn't explain it, I just described the concept. Can be taken to a new frontier, which right now could not hold a new radical extent, a new limit of what it would be to be revolutionary or radical or vanguard, which could never be stable. Um, and I was trying to come up with an example so that that in itself can be understood. Because we can't even concur that we have made these obvious mistakes in a clear way that makes it plausibly understood by a mass number of people. We're not even there yet. We're almost there, it seems. When you see what is a woman, you go, okay, now can we finally concur that we made a big mistake in how we're going about this as a society, as a country, as laws, as politicians. But we still are not. It seems we're not there yet. Hopefully next month. I don't know what's going to happen. I have a feeling that this movie is it's gonna be like Blackfish, where it's going to cause us there. But like Blackfish, will it just get lost in a larger? For those who don't know, Blackfish is the story of Dawn. I forget her last name, Blanchard, that got taken down into a pool by an orca because she just killed him, or I forgot his name. This poor orca had been, worked inside out from one aquarium to another. He got fed up, and I don't know what. Nobody knows what came over him. He grabbed Dawn and killed her, and took her to the bottom of the ocean. And that was kind of the cherry that topped the cake for a lot of activists. And they made this film that, whoa, you said, yeah, finally, people talked about it. And I think it got awards too. And SeaWorld is planning on making a bigger aquarium to convince people that they can be fooled into living in a larger environment. So you go when are we ever going to have enough critical mass, enough number of people to get the point across and to push over stubborn obstinance and this fear, sort of elated kind of, I'm gonna get away, I gotta run away with the gold, I got something, I gotta keep pushing, this area, this thing that I'm talking about, that we just let be their side, and this kind of I'm angry and violent, I hate you, I'm spoiled, and I'm also really enjoying this because I'm gonna keep running, right? It's kind of always there in other areas too, like the elation of the SeaWorld industry. As they're hearing how the facts that the science community and activists are making, and the truth about keeping an orca in a tank. I'm seeing a little bit of a fluctuation between the movement of my mouth and hearing myself. Anyways, and so, what's it going to take for those corporate people to say, okay, we've been beat? It's not a matter, and this is what my point is actually about. It's not a matter of being beat, of finally overcoming the gay community and their elated violence, to put it into one, to join the two sort of opposite emotional extremes into something, into a single thing that's happening to them. Just like the corporate guy from SeaWorld is also angry that they're trying to take his money and close down the theme parks, and at the same time super excited because he knows that there's plenty of room to do all sorts of things still, and money will continue flowing in. And it's the same thing. What does it have to do with? It has to do with enlightenment and education. Everything has got to do with finally understanding, with education, with seeing where you were It's not just somebody proving to you that you're wrong. it really is all about one discovering in their own silence, sort of say, what the truth is, what you hadn't seen. And absolution, which is recognizing, seeing profoundly how and why, both how and why, in what way, and what caused it. You were wrong, or you acted wrongly, or you believed, or you did the wrong thing, believed the wrong thing, is a very personal thing that happens inside of us, and it requires that. It requires that because its first sensitive trigger block is others witnessing, others seeing that you saw that. In tribal times, for example, we didn't have. Okay, wait, I'm about to shoot out of my butt. How can I say this? In ancient times, existed a tribal way of going about the judiciary, right? We didn't like today just punish and pile up years. The more they hurt, the more years that will take care of it, you know. Before it was about bringing the person that wronged the village. I'm not going to say even where and where. It's just kind of something we know. um, Africa, the Amazon. And before the elders, this person was contained, and you stole, you whatever, you wronged took the daughter of the elder man who you had to ask permission, or you robbed that sheep, or or you took over that house that was meant for your brother, whatever was transgressed against society in that tribe. And you know everybody knows even things that we accept today, like shouting at somebody rudely and loudly. We kind of know that it's starting something, but we've pushed it further out. It's okay, we can all scream at each other, but technically you could go back to, well, it started when you offended by using those words, when you raised your voice. That's where it all actually caused the first reaction in the other, right? So we all know when we're wrong, but we have angers and issues and things and injustices that we feel need to be settled. And there is a lot of stuff happening inside that we become sort of stubborn about why we want to continue on a path, let's say. I'm always thinking about neighborhoods in New York for some reason, the transgressor, the guy that seemed to be being brought up well enough in the family, and then just started stealing and doing, selling drugs or whatever. I always have that image of Bronx, It's such a prejudice, I know, but I guess Hollywood, yeah. And so that person brought before the elders, tribally, is told what he did wrong, which he knows, but at the same time, there is a containment by people who saw him grow up and understand, maybe that he was always treated worse in the family, and that they understood also. Many of them, probably these elders, argued, but let's not forget how he was always left behind, and blah blah blah. And so the elders argue about, and he witnesses this judgment that is trying to be fair about his actions. And wouldn't you know, this person starts also going in deeper to more easily access the natural absolution that is possible in the brains of every human being, and feels true regret, remorse, where a punishing judgment that is going to say, you are guilty and we may kill you because we don't tolerate it, and you're never going to be heard enough to matter, and so will only cause, will just cause distancing from that magical, very much plausible chemical reality that the brain has. And so the elders were wiser about that because the person brought in before the tribal council. Oh, I'm getting old. Words just fly out. Uh, yeah, council. Um, Starts feeling contained and loved, and that's what it's all about. Because he feels understood, because they remember that he was always treated wrongly in the family, that they were favoring his brothers, that everybody got everything and he never got anything, and all this. He sees that everybody witnessed that, remembers that, and then is able to access uh, wonderfully absolution. Not only admits, regrets what he did, but something happens that we don't see happen today in the judicial system, which is I want to offer uh, looks at the victim. Sometimes you see it in court because these are natural forces that are in our brain. And crying offers to, there's an intention, how long it may last for. It's an uncertain science, but basically the ancients knew how to use the natural dynamics of the brain to uh, have justice approximate something more that's like that resembles healing, a healing that's possible by natural chemical mechanisms in the brain. And so, by then, with a structure that facilitates that, instead of forcing people to be ideologies, values, principles that we write down and say we're going to act and judge and behave and pass down these kinds of instructions on each other, they had ways that sort of tried to assist the organic functioning of the human being much better because they hadn't. Well, anyways, I'm about to take another tangent. So the same way, um, we can understand what has caused each one of these people to believe or to transgress against their own bodies, to believe in, to feel these things, to feel the need to escape, to liberate themselves from a pain, a burden, which is very difficult to talk about right now, because if you can't talk about any of these things as the consequence of a uh, deeply embedded in the past trauma, pain, affliction, in self-development, of morale, personal morale, of ways of understanding oneself in relationship to the world. They're reactions to something that is hurting. And so there's a compensation, which is how life works. It's a compensation or reaction to something else, all of it. And so it's great that we first have to do this, in other words. Not only is it great, but we actually have to do this first. We have to first, everybody wake up, look at just how obviously all this is wrong before we can get to start saying, and it is wrong because this is how we're treating each other. Kids naturally want to escape into a fairyland that they no longer need to be accountable for being a man. They can just be an imaginary description that culture is providing, whether that be sort of a less important, less expected of a gay person, or becoming medically, surgically, whatever. These are ways, places, outlets. Abortion is that. Abortion, basically, women don't want to be accountable for their equal share of responsibility in the sexual act. They kind of want, guys, you take care of everything, and then we can blame you for everything too, And so leave me alone, you did this to me. It's always you, and now I want to be free too because it was you who did this, and that's what it is right now. If you brought back equal accountability and responsibility to the man as well, but because Western society, it's funny because when I listen to Matt about still talking about transsexual stuff, and he touches, for example, on one guy that really got kind of, I wanted to jump in the screen. Um, the father was innocuously, nonchalantly, not caring, weak, while the mother was turning his boy into a girl in front of his eyes. And I'm like thinking, oh my God, you just hit it so much right there. And not a little nail, a nail as big as the whole country. It's Western society. Somehow, that's the direction. It's a huge topic. And I mean, it's been talked, some people propose that it started in the industrial era when we became, little hammers, insignificant hammers that no longer directed our society. It just goes into a huge area of how we evolved, why men are naturally generous, not just capable, but generous in wanting to protect and make sure that all of society is organized and provided for. It should never be about men are more than women or women are more than men. No, because it's also another area of wonderful science that we still have so much to learn. We're wasting our time on these, dead ends when, for example, the relationship between men and women in the paradigm, and the scientific paradigm that it is fascinating. It keeps what do you call those, fractals? It keeps exploding into new things because we're the same. We're capable of substituting the other, but at the same time, one is more conducive, and so we're equal, but we're different. And then that equal and different, simultaneous equal and different, just gives for volumes and volumes and volumes. And we can still say a bunch of stuff without them not ever being not true. I mean, it is true. Let's be at peace with it. That women, whatever, tendentially? Tendently. Where am I getting that from? I think I'm translating from another language. Will have the inclination to maybe not seek how to build a little toy car when they're babies, toddlers, where a guy will want to build a little skyscraper when he's a toddler. That doesn't mean that men have a type of intelligence that women don't. No, it just means that, that's not where their focus is, that they don't care to expand that enormously right away. And then they turn around and look. Have you seen Sarah Hadid? She does amazing architecture. There are a lot of women, really, really interesting architecture. And it's also interesting to see how their creativity seems to flow a little differently. They tend to, and that's what we should be doing. We should be enthralled by how we project a different shadow from the same human being. Women can, maybe if we were true to listening to the nature of each one of our two genders and really just not intervene, not try to impose or direct how they're going to be equal or anything, and just see what happens when we finally took our hands off and allowed voting 100 years ago or whatever defines the start of feminism. And we just said, well, let's see what they do. Let's just not say anything. Let's just, okay, now we're out of, we're no longer here. We're not here. What do you want to do? What would have the woman become? Because what we've done basically is saying, do the same thing men do. We have 10 policemen, we need 10 policewomen. Women should go to wars, and, a man should just, we should be able to nurture babies and stay at home. It's not like one or the other. I think we stole ourselves the chance of discovering the woman, because if we have really understood this right from the get-go, it is true. Maybe women would have not resorted to establishing which is the victorious country and sent armies to settle the matter. Maybe women would say, no, wait, let's try this other angle, and how about if, and why don't we ever talk about that, And, oh, okay, would have said the guys, and that would have gotten talked about. and less wars would have occurred. Um, Probably they never would have wanted to take a gun in their hands to kill somebody. Um, Now we have totally trained with Kill Bill and karate chop flying legs that can kill as we're fascinated. It's men who are fascinated with seeing women do that. You know, so we robbed ourselves of that possibility, and now we would have to really discover human being, what the female version of the elements of human civilization would have come forth from the woman creating them according to her nature. And there would have maybe always been something that she comes back and says, wait, well, how did you guys, because there is that thing where guys learn how to do something and then teach women, and then women do it. And then maybe women add something to it. But, we have to stop being afraid of talking about the order of things that is there, because at the same time, once a woman learns how to initiate, she will teach and be the initiator in a guy, maybe. Teach a guy how to do something. So it doesn't end finally in one being first and the other one being second, but there is order, and we're so uncomfortable with talking about it. We're so we have choked ourselves with what you need to believe, how you need to reason, that we're not very versatile any longer in our logic, in our understanding living forms. There's nothing linear about living forms. A lot of this has, and we need to go back and look at how much individualist philosophies, that my right to self-determine and freedom, and I can do with my body what I want, and my individualism, and going back to capitalism and Anne Frank and a bunch of ideas and the others I hear mention, which I don't know about because, like I said, I'm not read or studied, but there's a whole area of recent history where the people were installing ideas mainly from the United States that have to do with, your little own house, your picket fence, and success, and the reality is what you make it, you pull your own weight, and individualism, and a whole bunch of things that possibly a reaction to fighting anything that sounds like a socialist idea, and therefore anything that is, collectivism, collective reasoning, or notions that would are sort of feared and reacted, propelled against, and that made us really believe and put all our money in individualism type ideas. And of course, that gave shape to how we later reason a lot of issues and how we interpret also things that are even older, like, for example, the Second Amendment. When we talk about guns and the Second Amendment in the States, we're not really talking contextually about why they in those years believed it was important, given what their experience of the world in Europe was. We don't talk about it that way. We talk about it, my rights, I have to defend myself and my family, and me. And it really has more to do with modern social ideologies, to do with individualism, and it has shaped so much of, in reality, the founding intellectual first step of understanding human beings, society, the human species, the human mind, the individual's mind, social values, starts with the collective form of the human being, the human form, the human being in a communal, plural sense of all. It starts with all. It doesn't start with one as a prototype, and then let's multiply that by how many we are. No, it starts with the all first. That's how nature understands existence in the universe. It doesn't, okay, let me see, I'm going to create first, No, nature says, goes in a direction where it's moving simultaneously multiple individuals or units, however you want to call it, at once. It doesn't understand, like, let's make one. And human beings do rationalize that way, and it has to do with survival and the mind being having two areas: the collective present truth, true to the form, sort of always collectivized thinking that is concerning me, and then the me that is the individualist, the individual sort of, I have to survive and push. I got to be able to run alone away from whatever danger there is in case it happens, and so those two areas of the brain are there, and we kind of have built, because it is the loudest, the most ingenious, the fastest thinking part of the brain, while the collective is always truest. The one that says a child needs both mom and dad. That's an intuitive, ancient awareness that comes from the collective part of the brain, and it's undisputable wisdom. The individual brain says, well, wait, we also have seen in nature, and thus we have this also that we can work with, which is the mom was left with the baby alone, and then she walked away to another tribe and raised the baby somewhere else with a new language. And so we see things that we are propelled, incentivized by our individualist need to further individually, which probably spearheads evolution, to create our inventions and our analysis and our logical thinking through the individualized analytical mind. And that has built the world. The world wasn't built thinking collectively with that part, which is truest actually, because the collectivized part of our brain is always going to be truer to nature. It simply knows. It simply knows, and that's it. Now, we can't exist simply knowing, because then we'd just be walking around naked, picking fruits off the trees. Some people propose that these days. We are both. We are a fusion of both. But we tend to let the individualist, sort of spearheading, selfish also, mind invent and design and build the world. And only recently, that selfish, very precocious mind has come back around and said, hey, wait, let's look at how ecology is a single thing, a single design, Gaia and ecological sciences. And yeah, it was all the rage. And now it seems that, if we had stuck to green ecological, humanist thought would have never contemplated abortion, for example, because it totally goes against the natural design of all for living forms. So we started, we kind of let our individually selfish, logical, analytical mind take over even green sciences, and started messing with that. And now you have woke progressives that are talking about things that are, to me, so anti-green, anti-organic, anti-true humanism. Okay, I got lost. I got completely lost by myself. I'm not lost. I've arrived, but all alone. Let's conclude this. Yeah, so just that. I just wanted to collaborate, can add to those that are where we are, because if I belong to any intellectual, I don't want to say, not call myself intellectual at all, but sort of progressive, true progressive, sort of radical, diffuse the woke left wrong analysis of the human form, and correcting newer movement, led by people like Matt Walsh, who are saying, "Look at all this stupidity! Wake up, people! Where are you? What are you thinking?" I would be there. That's my sort of my family, where I can find people that we've been seeing the same things. And to our movement, I would add, don't lose from sight, because it's also a good anchor for us. Don't lose from sight that those people started thinking that way, wanting that, believing it was true, because of something they needed to heal, to no longer hurt, to fill a void that hadn't been developed right, that it was something, that happened, and therefore that's what's, there is no separation between any of us. It could have happened to me. It did happen to me, actually. Here I am again. There's a split between my moving the head and what I say. Huh. Okay. It did. Yeah. And that's why sometimes I get a little, I know what I'm talking about. So don't, I'm not really bothered by people that are trying to, one of the things that, because a lot of other areas, like in homosexuality, in abortion, in divorce and raising your children, they overlap vertically, like you stack up donuts on a pole, with this sort of transsexual, what is a woman, gender ideology topic. In the dynamics or the mechanism of that flawed uh, mechanism, aired logic, they overlap. And they also provide the same sort of further out goal that would be understand what hurt them, what caused them to, and what those who were motivated by healing that wound, how they convinced others to just believe that without even suffering the wound or the hurt themselves, and creating an easier to believe and to promote movement, because they were so motivated by escaping their pain in their isolation or their void or whatever it was. And there is also a great missing that should be there also, sort of and also a goal that should be there. And perhaps it's closer to our present movement, to the present critical mass reality of the plausibility of this movement that is happening now, the correcting movement, let's call it, which is, well, how do we assist the fallen in war, the injured in war? How do we say, okay, where are people saying, okay, let's focus on an area of medicine that tries to rebuild the body, the sexual organs as best. Really put our focus on funding, on sophisticated surgery and avant-garde medicine and what have you, to try to bring back that person as best we can to where they should have always been. Like I said, the donut stacked on the vertical thing. In the same capacity, one of the results of sort of gay ideology, gender ideology, is that some men, and this typically doesn't happen to Americans younger than me, because we grow up, and this was not my case, that's why I'm able to be a little versed on this, but most of us grew up, only, launched into the 80s and post-80s, sort of, what are you? Were you born gay or were you born not gay? And so it's all about freeing, releasing, rising to the occasion of your true person, becoming the gay person that you're always meant to be. God wanted, Gaga, the Gaga theory. God, when was that song? God made me this way. All meant to justify, to support, to sustain that need for it to be healed and solved that way. what we don't talk about is how we do have the sciences. I mean, it's not like we have to reinvent them. You know, classically, the violent, oppressive mother that doesn't let the boy express their rebelliousness and go out there and get dirty in the mud and just be a pain in the butt for the mom that has to sweep, clean always the kitchen after him and patiently, you know, gifted that way. Why? Because you have to let the little boy roll around, right? Instead, you have the mother that don't be a boy. I dominate. I'm right away, sort of taking away that the possibility for that to develop. And then you have the father that Matt was talking about that just kind of like, oh, I don't care, do whatever, do whatever, I don't care, don't get me involved. You have a deadly combination for a boy not saying, well, what am I then? Well, now, we don't see these conditions because we fill in society with so much distractions and just a way of talking about that. Oh, no, it doesn't matter. Mothers don't matter. Blah 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 blah. They're always nagging. Go have a beer with your friends, or whatever. Go party or be rebellious. Uh, don't show up to class. Just we cover it all. We bury what science was already discovering. Actually, was starting to talk about. But with Christopher Street and Stonewall, we decided, no, 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 that's just too heavy. Let's turn this into a civil right. Let's just, you're born that way. Let's just leave it there. Let's not get into how it happens. God forbid we start discovering that the way our institutions, our families, our schools are treating children is resulting in an increase in homosexual need. When you talk about homosexuality as a compensation, it's like something that is being nature. We still don't understand really how, because it's something very profound. I mean, we're okay in talking about turtles. How when whatever condition happens, their eggs come out a certain way, or there's more homosexuality among the seagulls when they eat a certain fish or what have you. We're totally okay with that. But when it comes to us, all of a sudden we freeze up, we block up, and now we have made it illegal. And you can't even use brash words like clumsily not having the right vocabulary and saying an illness or a psychological dysfunction or an imbalance or anything like that immediately gets knocked down, because you're not supposed to not honor and cherish and sort of nurture their liberation. That is, when making them happy without needing to understand why, you have to let that be, so we don't have to deal with it anymore that way. So we're subtracting the hard work, in other words, from society, from intellectual development of society and culture, which is not hard to believe. One would try to avoid what is difficult. So, therefore, when the case is not the typical American that sees only two possible routes post-adolescence or post-childhood, be gay or don't be gay, be straight. And you have instead maybe somebody who came from some Middle Eastern country, from perhaps less likely, but a Latin American country, or even a European country, who had a society that really saw homosexuality as something that happens. Nobody's kicking it, nobody's being mean, or in some Middle Eastern countries they hang you. But what I'm saying is, where the general consensus is that this is the norm. Guys eventually get attracted to women and have families, and that other behavior is unusual, quirky, rare, abominable, whatever, but it's a small exception to how you understand existence of the human species, right? And so all of the elements that has raised that person, perhaps even up until they were, you know, 13 or 12, were all about, you know, growing up with the guys. And well, maybe there was a little bit of softness created by a situation in the family where the mom really didn't treat him like he was a boy or ignored him, or, you know, maybe the father kept putting him down or what have you. But, you know, he was maybe a candidate. Not in that country, though. Not in that country. That country, the guys were all resiliently, in the resilient capacity of human society, uh, nurturing where the father and the mother had lacked. So he was going to be just a guy, and meet the right girl one day and get married and be happy and just have other guy friends and never even think about homosexuality. Whereas that same guy would have grown up in the States by age 11, he would have already seen, oh, well, that does, for some reason, it seems I could escape this lack that I'm suffering, or this something, this void, this non-validation, or something that I'm suffering by just seeing myself as something that's not meant to be, a girl, which I will never be, so therefore gay, which is something that everybody makes room for and nobody really wants to judge too much or condemn, and not in this country, we don't hang them. I mean, it's really fascinating, but it's very broad and complex because the same kid growing up in Iran, um, you know, it would have been even less, perhaps, or even more. It would backfire, the repression, or they're sort of pushed towards transvestitism, rather than, if they're transvestites, they have a little niche where they're accepted. What they don't accept in Iran, and I also noticed, anyways, what they don't accept in Iran is somebody who's a guy but says that they're gay. And in the West, what we don't like is a guy who is a guy, but people suspect that he's suppressing his homosexuality. So there's different forms of this happening in different cultures. But what I'm getting at is that, let's say that those guys from Iran or from some part in Argentina or in Latin America comes to the States at that age of 12, um, and all of a sudden meets a bunch of guys and girls in high school that are just thinking it's so funny and entertaining to be acting queer and gay, and there's, you know, the gay loner that prances around always full of makeup and wild, you know, rockabilly hair and aisles that everybody thinks is too extreme, and so everybody, and you know, going to bars where there you see guys, oh my God, they kissed, you know, the two guys, and that's high school, right? It's all fun and games and interesting and fascinating and fast and daring, and so that kid all of a sudden easily sees, wow, you know, he was tender, he would have totally been receptive of this, is receptive to this in this new country, where if he had stayed in Latin America or the Middle East, that sore skin, nothing would have touched it, but things that in time gradually maybe strengthened that skin. You know, good friends, a couple of good guys, family. You know, maybe he was lucky and had a couple of older brothers that slapped him around a bit and taught him to be courageous in fights, and you know, and they broke that. Could have been a tendency in America, but in Latin America it actually healed, or in the Middle East. And so what happens when that kid comes to the States, immediately starts going to gay clubs after high school, and feels released. Yeah, because those conditions were there. Even if he wasn't destined by that culture to become gay in that other country, gay, socially gay, when he came to the States, it sure made it easy, or maybe England or France or some Western country, Spain. He immediately took to the water like a duck, and became super, super, and of course, elated and happy because he felt released from something that was deep, deep, deep inside him, not letting him feel complete, empowered, emancipated onto the world. There was stuff that was still lagging, pressuring, hurting, wounding, voided, what have you. I'm saying all these different things because there's not a precise science that I know of that I can speak more fluidly with. And then this kid, this character, the story that we're talking about, gets to be 20, and after really going crazy for a while in the gay community, all of a sudden, just this girl from Denmark or from other country out of nowhere, who doesn't respond or echo any of the local culture, signals, catches his attention, and she really likes him because she doesn't see him as gay. She sees him as a guy from the Middle East or from some Latin American country that sees a real person. Maybe didn't meet him at a gay bar, but saw him at work or at school or something, and really just liked him and started. And wouldn't you know, this guy really also devoid of any of the influences and the isolation with this girl, was able to start, hey, I kind of like how she treats me, how she makes me feel. I feel she's bringing out something in me that I sent back, that I didn't let stand up. Of course, he doesn't verbalize it this way, probably. But, and all of a sudden, he has a relationship, and he has mad, crazy sex with her, and they fall in love, and, maybe it plays out for a year or two, and then it turns out that they have different lives. She wants to go back to Denmark, or they're not compatible, and starts coming to the end of this. And he's in a situation where the safety condition releases him to a society that once again has the signals, the expectation, because how he talks or what clubs he goes to or the kinds of jokes he cracks or how he is and his demeanor are starting to say, oh yeah, that's a gay guy, that's a gay guy. And they start sort of telling him, we see you as a gay guy. And so even though he may think, well, I wonder if I'll have another girlfriend, or maybe starts looking at another girl because he likes who he was with the Danish girl. He really did. And he wants to be that. And he starts understanding. And once you know that he picks up a book and reads some psychology books from the 50s and 60s, and everything makes a lot of sense. And he understands a lot of stuff. And he says, oh, I'm going to make a concerted effort here. I'm going to not go back to the gay club and continue showing and living and experiencing this person I am, and I'm lonely. I want to, maybe it's difficult to make straight guy friends, because the whole society is conditioned to look for signals in a culture that has separated men into gays and straights. And so there are no straight guys that will say, oh, you're one of us who got lost for a couple of years or for 5 years. Come here, and I don't care. I don't care what you did. I don't care, come on. I can see that you just want to be friends. I can tell you're not trying to hit on me. That is very difficult for straight Americans to say, oh, don't look at me though. I can have gay friends. They don't see it as somebody who's recovering, who's coming back, who remembered himself. We're not capable as a society to embrace. We're not naturally capable. We don't need methods. We don't need medical systems, therapies. But it does have to be through people. If people, family, mother, father, influences, culture, society, interaction, is what generated a lack of development, a lack of sexual maturation, self-perception of self, or however you want to describe the condition of needing to compensate or seeking homosexual love. It would be through the same category of interaction that a restoration of that person that was left underdeveloped to come back. Now, it may be that after 30 years, it could be almost really hard that the person even wants to or cares to. But I think there are phases, especially in a guy that really intensely took it out on homosexuality, and then when he was still young, 19 or 25 or what have you, saw that, oh yeah, no, this is what I'd rather be. I'd rather be a guy, and I would rather be seen as a guy by my girlfriend and her guy friends, and I like that life. I like that exists. That is true, that is real, that is healthy, that is broad, that is universal, that is global. That makes me equal to everybody else. I'm fully here. I see what I did. Oh my God, what happened to me? There's nothing to receive those people were they to start happening, because I think there are many in the United States, but there are many in other countries where there still doesn't exist this, where the scientific understanding of homosexuality is such that it doesn't blame the individual. It understands that society causes this to itself to happen, to arise in individuals. Individuals are the victims of the way we go about treating one another in this civilization, how we values, principles, ideas, ideologies, culture, how we take it out on our children, how we're selfish we're as parents, and our values about how to raise our children, how to treat each other as parents in front of our children, and blah, 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 blah. And all of the cultural messages, we all grow up in this, each one of us, and therefore are affected in our development by the whole world and society. And therefore, homosexual development, the increase of, because homosexuality is just wiring, basically. You switch it around. You put a guy with a guy instead of a guy with a girl, and you leave him locked up in a room, and eventually, it's not that they're going to want it. It's just that the mechanics of chemistry of sexuality doesn't really have a fixation about making sure absolutely that it doesn't check to make sure that it's a girl. There are forces in sexuality. So really, homosexuality by definition is the behavior of having two guys have sex. Now, a lot of things happen that are kind of after the stronger forces do their thing and make it happen, take it through, through the motions of until conclusion. There were latent feelings that have to do with the nature of homosexuality being a paradigm, a fused single condition, nature of homosexuality is of attraction and repulsion. That's why if all gay guys that were truly sincere, they will all tell you, I remember there was something funny, a little uncomfortable. I had to learn how to do that. It didn't really seem like I was going to enjoy it so much until the second or third time. We learn also to go against the musculature of the body. And so, but of course they will not in the States anyways, or any country, because as a world we haven't educated our societies to understand what the human species does to itself and how it causes this to develop in individuals. We don't see it that way. We come from a tradition from ancient times and from the 50% fear or instability, discomfort that is inherent in the nature of homosexuality, to not want to dwell too much for when it's not something that enthralls you and you're totally gung-ho about. And therefore, okay, I just lost my point. I just lost the point I had at the tip of my tongue. Oh yeah, why never in history have we had a thing where we clearly understood every case, like something happened to this person, they did something to society, the family, the belief, what he believed culture, society was telling him really, you know, uh, picked up in him because of a situation. And we're also born with a different sort of setup, biological, chemical, or natural psychology setup, where, for example, you get two brothers growing up in the same family, and the mother was as canceling out, what have you, domineering and castrating in her way of treating the boys as with one as much as with the other. But one, somehow, just because of how nature made his brain, was more capable of saying, whatever, dad is, I'm going to pay more attention to dad, or I'm just going to go out and play, or I'm just going to hang out more with my friend Jimmy across the street. And the other one stayed more like, I really have to, conquer that dislike of me. I'm really affected by it. I wonder why she, contemplate why is she not loving me. There's a different kind of brain just given to us by nature, which will react differently to the same treatment by the same mother or father. And so that's another aspect that because we've wanted to silence the whole science. If we were to open it up again, we eventually would get to where, so if it's just our prowess, our speed as an industrious society, that will sort of result in so many men and women, or especially men perhaps, developing a need to continue being loved by themselves, in other words, by another man. And we can establish, well, if I can just press a button at birth, I would decide that it's not the optimal expression for my sexual body, my life, my optimal fulfillment. And we can establish that at peace without offending anybody, realizing that the individuals are the victims, not the doers of anything. We can say, well, let's look at this science. And knowing that some guys, even if their parents were perfect, they just came out a little wobbly, knowing how to be there as family, as friends, for something that can happen to the human body. Not for, poor little drunk, we got to help him. No. This is, look, here's, somebody whose sexuality didn't stand up right away. Sort of like the fold, or the fold, or the deers, or I don't know what animal it is, that sometimes they have a hard time getting up. And so what does a parent do? They come back, they try, maybe, another elephant, another male deer, or what have you, who's always minding their own business. They see that and they go, they just know, as a society, as a culture, that can happen, and they intuitively, and hopefully through a new form of social understanding about ourselves, will go up to that fold and say, here, mom, he needs me to help him up. He just needs a little more confidence. He needs a male bull to kind of say, okay, get up now, there you go. And then he walks back to doing nothing for the world. Leaves the fold nicely stood up with the mother. But we don't know how to do that. And so if that kid that I was talking about, Latin America and the Middle East, comes out of that relationship with a Danish girl in America today, he goes, boom, straight back into that club. I'm not going to do any publicity. And goes back to being 18 again, and only knowing how to satisfy. And of course, the conditions that made him tender, that would not have necessarily led to a homosexual life in Latin America or the Middle East, but in the States did immediately spill him into the gay community, are still there and may do a great deal of healing after, let's say, 20 years of living, Redondo Beach, surfing and having one girlfriend after the other or what have you. And they still may be there, or they may heal quite enough to say, "Oh, he's really." I'm just going to volunteer this. I can say for a personal testimony that having lived something similar like that, when I came to Europe another time, not this time, and did have a girlfriend for the first time, I was like 29, and really had like guy sex with a woman. Um, well, I was just running around like the reverse case. Like, yeah, I found myself. Yeah, this is it. So I know that there's something happening in the brain can just as easily want to run the other way, not just heal the wound. And it is because homosexuality by nature is the fusion of both directions of attraction, repulsion, aversion, and force of that force of attraction can have different intensities of anyways. And I experienced, did I intentionally test myself, or maybe I was being self-destructive, I don't know, but we had a 2-week period in which we didn't talk to each other, and she went to live in another vacant apartment. And I remember feeling, doing the usual thing, going to a hallway or something, and feeling like a straight guy that got like, what is that? Got a little discomfort in my stomach right here. I knew logically that I would have been all over that, 4 years before or 3 years before. Okay, 2 years before. But at that moment, I had done such a steady trajectory of being the guy in bed and liking also that for the first time the guys were giving me okay, you're part of the group. The straight guys, we got together every day after work and telling guys and girls and just a straight group of friends. So I didn't feel like my past was a secret or anything. This is how I started living in Europe from the start, in Italy. So I didn't come with a gay agenda to Italy. So I didn't think I was lying to anybody. I just liked this new person that I somehow found myself becoming. And then it became more when I started going out with this girl. And also that the guys were like, hey, we're all going somewhere. If I had been the gay guy from the States that was a friend of everybody's, but openly gay and never brought his boyfriend around, because he was just the accepted gay in the straight group, they wouldn't have treated me the way I was feeling they were starting to treat me because they saw me with this girl. And that was healing. That acceptance, and of course it all clicked because I understood a lot of the stuff that I had been reading in psychology started making sense. It was all that they were starting to, a little bit at a time, heal those places that had been left undeveloped, voided, never developed interest or strength, and now they were building something. Anyways, it's not a science that exists. We have done the opposite. We have legally wanted to shut up the science and sexology, healthy sexology, not what that idiot convinced the whole country to go with, but the healthy sexology that would really be interested in knowing the fascinating dynamics that human sexuality, demonstrate or resort to if things are not developing right. And how there are also forces that will make it conducive to restoring that sort of detour, that temporary detour, and all of the true dynamics that exist in the sexual human brain. It's just fascinating. Why we're not more interested and are just wasting our time with fighting and taking sides, is beyond me. It's, there's just so much to talk about. And it's funny because when people say the truth, we think it's we put ourselves in a little corner in a small type space where there's a single answer. No, it's actually the opposite. The truth opens the science of how we're really designed biologically by evolution, and it's a continually like fractal explosions, like I was saying before, of things that we need. But to accept ourselves learning this expanding new fields of science, we would have to understand that we need to shut the door on certain nagging beliefs that subconsciously have trained us to reject certain inferences, things that start sounding like, or we're not used to hearing, and create fear or suspicion or insecurity in us because they start sounding subconsciously like we maybe. That is very difficult. That's kind of like a motivator killer. Um, for example, just to give an example, and I'll finish. This has got to be the longest video I ever made. Um, just to give an example, if you said, for example, we want to put in the Constitution, every American has a stable and secure, self-validating, undisturbable place he can call home, a home, basically. Um, somehow word that so that it's not, you're always provided a hotel-like facility in case you're homeless, but somehow, you can continue to stay someplace for the rest of your life, secured. Now, it doesn't, let's just put that as a principle. Now, immediately, what do you get? What's the reaction you get from a lot of people? Oh, nobody will pull their own weight. People are lazy. Now you'll get promote poverty. Drug addicts will just, hang out and not want to work and blah, 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 blah. No, 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 no. That's not saying any of those things. Just like when we argue, I'm looking there because I still have Matt Walsh on the screen, like plastered on my computer. No, we're not saying that. We're simply saying now you can effectuate that new article in the Constitution in any number of ways that are even conducive to people wanting to have a better home, wanting to not be in a limited situation. It could be pretty, it could have a little balcony, it could have whatever, it could be out in the countryside, but maybe make it in a way that people are always can easily have something more, can have a couple of family members over without being crowded, will continue foster expanding their lives so that eventually that house will be small. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to mean that you're stagnating society by guaranteeing that nobody sleeps on the streets in a constitutional article. But even to be able to understand that, people have to get rid of all those subconscious no's, the prejudices that invade new ideas. It is in our bill. One of the things I once, okay, I promise I'll finish with, I wanted to write down and make one of those little refrigerator magnets, was if everybody learned to listen, hear when somebody, and accept when somebody is just simply making sense, they can understand, they can relate, they can see where it applies and how it may be true, what that person is saying, until the point where they don't know how to see that as plausible, true, for real. Not because they have to fight and they have to always push against until it makes sense to create an opposing debating statement, which is what everybody does. They listen to you, they say, okay, that works for me, proving that they're not making sense, that they're saying this other thing that can just stop them and get them to shut up. No, if we were all able to simply say, okay, that I don't understand anymore. So far, everything you say, I see how it would be plausible, how it would make sense and what you're referring to, what you would be using for it to work. I can hear what your the validity of the mechanism of your logic is. I hear it. I understand it. But when that person says something that, oh, I don't know where that would come from or how that would possibly work or what that area means. I've never heard about that topic or that being an issue, an equal issue around the subject. To be able to say, okay, wait, up until that point, I can understand. I can't understand further from there. And therefore, the conversation is paused and left at that point. If you're truly interested, you need to go yourself, go find out and how the logic of that person continues to work by learning these elements that you didn't understand or know about. See if, in fact, he's still making sense and continue the conversation. In other words, nobody's never really wrong in how they mean something, which is not how we're arguing these days. Today, we are arguing based on, well, you want to say today and we, I don't know what I mean by that, but a lot of the times we see ourselves arguing by discrediting the motivation of the other. You're only saying that because. So therefore, we're never believing what the other person is saying. If you open any social network, what you see is people having a duel, a duel of words that can be construed to justify how the other one knows that they don't know what they're talking about, they don't mean what they're saying. Nobody's really caring for, otherwise we would be making progress on social networks. People would be saying, oh, we finally solved this, and a couple of months later, whoop, wouldn't you know, this problem has finally been solved. This social network, they look at what they're saying. Look at what came out of this other social network. No, that's not what we're saying. What we're seeing is that people vent their necessity of, I'm not going to go into that tangent, but basically they're not getting anywhere. It's amazing, such a gift, such an amazing breakthrough where the world as a planet for the first time has a mouth and an ear and it can hear itself speaking beyond borders. If they wanted to, they could have improved translation and technologies and so, part of it. And people could be discussing all over the world and really saying, well, if that, I learned something, I learned that, and the other person said, and I learned from you, and now we're here instead of back there. Yeah, that's, a lot of people are actually seeing that, trying to talk about this possibility, this potential the internet offers. But it's too big. It's too big for anybody even to conceive how anybody would want that or how that would be anything humanity. We still don't believe it. The critical mass is nowhere near people starting to believe, yeah, this, unless somebody forces it and says we got to do this. Okay, thanks for listening. So a long time. Bye.